Hey everyone, this is Lou Rosenfeld, and welcome to the latest Rosenfeld Review podcast. I have Andy Welfle and Michael Metts on the line. Hi, guys.
Hey, how are you?
Great. I'm really happy for a number of reasons today. And one of them, besides talking with you, is knowing that the book that you two are writing for Rosenfeld Media is in production, which means
Oh, shoot. Were we supposed to write that?
You were supposed to come up with a final title. What title are you going to offer us today?
Michael, do you want to go for that?
Yeah, the title we're working with right now is Designing with Words, How to Write for Interfaces. And things may change, but that's what we have right now.
That's right. Things can and do change in this sausage making of book publishing. It hasn't gone to the printer yet, but we are looking to see that book come out this fall of 2019, or if you're down under, let's just call it Q3.
Yeah.
And you know, this is been one of the most enjoyable books for us to work on, partly because Andy and Michael are just like they know how to write for some reason. You know, it's like they're writing a book about writing, and in a way that sounds like it's obvious, but I'm from knowing a lot of people who are writers who actually have tried to write about writing, it's kind of deceptively difficult. And I think we should get into that in a moment, but I should at least say that Michael is at Allstate and Andy's at Adobe. Michael working in conversation design, Andy in content strategy. They have interesting leadership roles in those respective organizations. But this is really about UX writing. And UX writing is like something we hear about a lot these days. It's, it's sort of one of those things that people go, oh, yeah, I know what that is. But I imagine if you got 10 people and interviewed them about what their definition would be for UX writing, you might get 10 different definitions. How are you guys framing it at this point?
This is actually really funny because right before we started recording, I was looking at my tweets, and a tweet that I tweeted in June just got put up on the big screen at the Design and Content Conference about this exact topic. So my tweet was that Halverson's law, of course, referring to our mentor and idol Christina Halverson, a positive correlation exists between the number of content strategists in a conversation and the likelihood that they'll discuss their job role. And then I said, which reminds me of a joke: how many UX writers does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is, I wouldn't know. I'm a content strategist. Which is meant to be funny and snarky, but I think it kind of just shows how kind of new and influx UX writing is as a sort of formalized practice. I mean, it's been going on for forever, for as long as there's been digital experiences, but I think it's kind of newly baked in. We've had so much good just sort of thought leadership all over the internet about it, and it just seems like the time is right to write some text, write some books. So that's what we're here to do.
So, well, let's dig a little bit into the definition, though. I mean, are people who've been writing documentation for, let's say, software, maybe let's narrow it. Let's say online documentation. Are they UX writers?
So they might be, but I don't think that's the focus. Usually, what I hear is people doing that type of work are more interested in affecting the product itself. So I've had the opportunity recently to talk with a lot of newcomers who are trying to make their way into the field and focus on UX writing. And what they talk about is how maybe it's through documentation. They were asked to document a certain feature, and they felt like there could be improvements to the feature itself that would, if they made those improvements, they wouldn't even need to write the documentation, right? They felt like they were being asked to write blog posts about how to use the software. And they felt like if they could just fix what was wrong, they wouldn't have to write the blog post. So to me, that's not quite what we're talking about. But people in those roles tend to have a really good mindset for this type of work because they see the software through a different lens, through the lens of the language that's being used.
And so, like, let's draw some lines around the practice. What kind of work or might they be doing as UX writers? What kind of challenges might they be addressing? Problem solving.
Well, one of the things that is interesting about the field is that it's really just, in one sense, it's a UX role. So a lot of general UX skills apply. Being able to do research, being able to uncover user needs, being able to be objective about the problem and not have it be a reflection of your opinion, being able to represent the user's voice. All those things are really key. I think for the writers in particular, what they bring to this equation is a better grasp of how to use language to solve problems. A lot of teams are unequipped or under-equipped to do things like, name a feature or write the narrative that someone needs to follow as they work through an experience. So that's the unique aspect that someone brings that's really about their writing skill set. But there's a huge part of the job that's really about learning what user experience is and how that applies to the craft of writing.
Yeah, it really is sort of a, just that beautiful mixture between writing and design, right? Like we talk about it as designing with words all the time. This is not a phrase that we own, but like it's definitely something that is the best way to describe it. I usually tell people that I, write, but with a design methodology. So it's not just like linear narrative. It's a iterative, testable, reproducible, like methodology. So
Okay, so
yeah,
I'm gonna hold your feet to the fire just for one more round here, and I'm gonna ask you to draw a contrast or compare UX writing and content strategy. I know you're just loving these questions.
um, I don't know. I call myself a content strategist. My team is the content strategy team. I think that probably 80% of what we do is UX writing. It's kind of UX writing is one of, I think, like the functional outputs of content strategy, right? Like that content strategy is the underlying, just practice, and UX writing is one of the outputs. So I know that there's a lot of people who just like really draw a comparison there, but I tend to reserve the right to do the strategy behind the content and the writing and the experience, and also produce the words, which is UX writing. So some people, plenty of teams out there, like have UX writers on the team, and they like can be clearer about what their output is and what role they play, by kind of like looking at it from the surface level down instead of sort of from the foundation up, which is kind of like how we frame it.
So obviously, someone doing UX writing is going to do some kind of in the trenches, or maybe better put, in the weeds work in terms of making decisions about things like, are we going with sentence case for certain headings? Are we, how are we going to make an error message intelligible? Things like that. But is it strategic as well? I mean, does strategy, let me ask, is the strategic end of UX writing things like helping bring voice and tone and reusable content to design systems?
Right. So to me, there's a big difference between the act of writing, the doing that on a team, and the job title of writing. I think anyone who is doing that writing work should also have a strategic mindset to some degree, no matter what their job title is. So not being called a content strategist should never prevent you from applying content strategy to what you're doing. There's a chapter in the book about strategy, even though the book is mainly focused on the needs of writers. And that's because the way you get to figuring out what the appropriate solution is should really be based on the strategic goals of the product and of the team. And so it's not as if there's a cut and dried correct answer in all these cases. We have to understand what our goals are. We have to align the team on that. We have to facilitate good decision making. And so even if your title is a writer, and even if you spend 80% of your time writing, you're going to be most effective if you have a strategic mindset that you apply to those problems as well. So, like the design systems is a great example. Design systems need writing and content represented in them. And so, if you don't have that strategic mindset in terms of how what you're writing can be applied beyond the particular instance you're using it to the wider product or the wider organization, then you're not going to be as effective.
We specifically stayed away from roles within the book just because like it can be so fraught and different and immediately connect with somebody, right? Like they can have preconceived notions about what it is we're trying to teach them. So if you're a visual designer, on a UX team who is thinking strategically about words, this book is still for you. If you're a product manager and you're thinking about the words in the interface, this book is still for you. It's not necessarily just content strategists or UX writers or content designers or whatever you call yourself.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you want more, not only do we have a whole bunch of podcasts in our archive, but we have something that's very current, very alive, and very engaging for groups, and that is our communities. Rosenfeld Media runs a variety of communities that meet on a monthly basis for video conferences on a variety of topics near and dear to UX people, ranging from enterprise experience to advancing research to design and research operations. I want to encourage you to join one of our communities. Again, it is free by going to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. Not only will you get a monthly video conference that you can listen in on and participate in, ask questions and so forth, we'll give you access to the recordings. And for some of those communities, we're talking about dozens of recordings with really interesting presenters and facilitators. You'll also get a newsletter. You'll get access to an advice columnist. Yes, we actually are providing advice columnists for each community. And finally, if you're interested in our conferences, our communities correspond to our conferences. So you will be the first to know when programs go live, when tickets go on sale, and by the way, most of our conferences sell out, and other good things about our conferences, such as when the scholarship applications open up. So go to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. You're going to find something that's free, something that's interesting, and it's a great opportunity to find your tribe as well. We'll see you there. So like many other UX or just generally design and content related areas, we're seeing a democratization, or at least, a democratization of skills, but also maybe more importantly, a broader recognition that we all do a bit of everything and therefore should know a little bit about everything, or at least have respect for just about every various practice under the umbrella that we all share. But for people who really are looking to make this the main part of their work or the backbone of their careers, I know you mentioned that you've been looking into new people who are trying to become UX writers, job title or not. I've seen this personally. My wife is a former journalist and has done a lot of fiction writing, and she was a freelancer for many years, and now she's a full-time UX writer, the only one in a large financial services corporation with tens of thousands of employees. And it's been a fascinating thing for me to see that transition. And so it's very top of mind for me. I just wonder, in your research, what are you seeing as the sort of journey that people have? Is there a pattern where they suddenly have an aha moment at a certain point that's almost predictable? And then what kind of accelerates their making progress toward that goal of becoming gainfully employed in some respect of UX writing?
Yeah, so like I said, we've had some great conversations recently. I did interviews for the book with a lot of newcomers to the field to see what their journey has been like so far and how they're making their way in. And the common thread is people wanting to, again, be part of the solution to the problem and not just write about the problem. And I really do think that people who are writers can find a place on design teams and in tech because they bring a really different skill set to problem solving than someone who's visually oriented, for example. So like going back to design systems, if you look at many of the examples out there, they are largely about components and how to use different things that someone might interact with. So you have your buttons, but there's very little in the design system saying how to write the label for that button, right? How to go through a process where you can find the right answer to that. And writers are really good at thinking that through and breaking it down and breaking down a message to a point to where they come up with the solution of that problem. So the best way people can make it into this is by learning how to cast their work in that light, right? To say to someone, I'm doing product work as well, but my craft is with writing and with using language. Your craft may be visual design. Your craft may be code. My specific craft is using language and words.
And for sure, like one of the, I made a joke with a friend, Erica Hall, at the last confab about one of the reasons why I think that this practice didn't take off earlier is because we just don't have a good complicated tool that nobody else knows how to use. And, like Michael was saying, when you document a button in a design system, by gosh, that corner radius is really well documented, and the color that you use for the, steady state and the hover state and the click state, that's all documented really well. But anybody can just put some words on there, right? Being able to kind of systematize the way that you do that for consistency and obviously clarity is kind of the main reason we're here.
Well,
the irony, just to add on that.
Sure.
Sorry, is it okay that I jumped in?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the irony, just to add on that, is that the words that go on the button, what we've seen in usability testing throughout our careers is that that's usually the most critical piece to make the software usable, and yet that's not where design teams are spending a lot of their time. So that's what the advantage that writers really bring to a team. They can help them solve problems in new ways. And the challenge for UX writers is casting what they do as a specialized skill set. Because like Andy said, a lot of people in the design industry can tend to think of the ability to use a tool as what it takes to design something. But that's not the case at all.
Well, I want to just spend a moment on maybe a different kind of tool than maybe most people think of, namely something you mentioned earlier, the kind of tools that people who are doing UX writing might employ to do user research. Maybe a better term would be methods. So yes, like other designers, we need to do user research. We need to have some tools in the toolkit to help us, or some methods, I should say. What are the kind of methods that UX writing really leans on most of all? And is it very different than, let's say, a visual designer might lean on?
So I don't think that, well, some of the methods are a little bit different. I think when you're writing, you may rely more heavily on different aspects of research, for example. So for the book, there's a great book out there called Site Search Analytics that you wrote.
Oh dear.
A topic like that.
Suck up.
A topic like that becomes really important, far more important to a writer, because that helps you identify the words people are using as they look around your product or as they look for your product. All those things, those concepts apply, especially to writing. And then also, like with testing, for example, I think the way a lot of usability testing is done is that some teams may opt towards testing the happy path, right? Like make sure everyone can get through it. But a writer may be more interested in testing what happens when things go off the rails and when you're seeing an error message, and whether that error message helps people understand what to do next, and whether there's comprehension there of what the system has just done. For that reason, a lot of times, like one of the testing methods we describe in the book, which originated with the gov.uk team, is that you can separate the words from the interface. You can actually just write those things out on a piece of paper, put those words in front of a user, and see what their expectations are after reading them, or what they think will happen next, or what their emotional reaction to it is. And all those things are really helpful. So it's not as if you're inventing new techniques, but more like you're using those same core skill sets that a design team may be familiar with, and focusing them on the words.
Got it. So that it's interesting that method that you talked about a moment ago. It almost sounds as if you're sort of separating the words from the interface and making. I mean, you can kind of test them in a more pure way, if I hear you.
Exactly. One of the things that we've tried in our own practice is to test, have participants mark whether something is helpful or not helpful, and that can help you see when your tone may be inappropriate for a certain situation, right? If you're adding in a nicety, like "Hey there," when someone is having trouble with their billing, for example, then that can help you really illuminate that in that type of situation, you really shouldn't bring a casual or lighthearted tone to that interaction, because people are not finding it helpful to move through the process.
I have one last question for you, because I think we're looking at the clock and we're getting there. The my big question for you guys is, why are so many writers in the field so damn snarky?
That's that's a very good question. I think I I don't know if I can talk specifically about writers in the field, but I can talk about interface language in general. Um, I think that often there's kind of a fallacy that goes around that says like, oh hey, like this is an error moment or a null state or an empty state or a 404 page or something, and people, this is a really good opportunity to like really you know get win some hearts and minds and like be whimsical or like be funny or something like that. And so you might see like a error message or a 404 page that says like, oops, you probably didn't mean to do that. And the thing that I just always kind of push back with is like, well, if you're talking to somebody in real life, like let's say you're a cashier at a retail store at Target or something, and somebody wants to buy some stuff and they swipe their credit card and it's declined, and you're just like, oops, looks like you need some more money. Like, you wouldn't say that. Somebody would get mad. That's exactly the way it is for digital experiences too. Like, you should not you should use a tone that's kind of like appropriate for the context the user is in. So just as like I have a different tone when I'm talking to Michael or talking to you or talking to my mother or talking to my college roommate, like, I can kind of tone switch between that, even though I am Andy. Your software can and should do that too, right? Like, you have kind of your brand voice, you have the voice that you have voice attributes, but you should shift the way that you talk and the information that you present and how wordy or succinct you are depending on the user context. And that's what tone is. So that's a big portion of the book. We have a whole chapter just sort of about tone approaches. We interview some really interesting experts in the field.
Well, Andy, you know what?
Yeah.
I thought I was setting you up to take my snarky question about snark and answer it in a even more snarkable way, and instead you answered it. You answered it straight and in a really helpful, positive way. So,
Lou, maybe you just didn't ask the right question.
Me. You outwitted me. Well, thank you both. Before we wrap, I always like to wrap these podcasts up with a question around, what should our listeners know about? What's going on? What's a person who's doing interesting work or something you've read lately that you think the world should know about?
I don't know if we're allowed to talk about other publishers here.
That's fine. We're all friends.
Tori Podmajersky just wrote a book for O'Reilly called Strategic Writing for UX, and which is not only about like the same thing we're writing about, but she takes a much different approach, which I really appreciate. I think that it's going to be such a good, useful kind of companion piece or maybe since ours is coming in after, ours will be a really good companion piece to hers. So definitely read Strategic Writing for UX if you get a chance.
Oh, that's great. And Tori, if you're listening, hopefully you'll return the favor in some future podcast. How about you, Michael?
So your comment about snarky writing made me think of this blog post that Scott Kuby at Brain Traffic recently wrote called "Content Strategy is Boring, and That's Okay." It's not specifically about UX writing, but the principles I think really apply, and it draws us back to I think what Andy and I are really passionate about in our book, which is that you need to be clear and concise. It's not so much about being exciting or punching things up, but it's about making sure that people are able to use the systems we're designing. There's a lot of responsibility that goes into that, and sometimes that means that you know, like the post. I guess it's funny because it is kind of snarky, like you said. He said content strategy is boring. But that's not really his point. His point is that maybe you need to think about it differently. You need to think about it in terms of trying to be clear and concise. So I could send you that link over later if we want to share it with the listeners.
That'd be great. And both of you, it's really been a lot of fun to work with you, and Snark's part of it. So thanks for indulging me. Thanks for your great work. We're looking forward to seeing the book come out in the third quarter of 2019. It's Designing with Words by Michael Metts and Andy Welfle, our guests today on the Rosenfeld Review podcast. Thanks, guys. Great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thanks, Lou.
Take care. Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. I'd love it if you tell a friend to have a listen, and check out our website for over 100 podcasts with other interesting people. You'll find them all at rosenfeldreview.com.